The equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt stands tall in front of the American Museum of Natural History. It was designed and built by sculptor James Earl Fraser and was dedicated on October 27, 1940, for the purpose of the remembrance of the President with respect to his pioneer work for the conservation of the United States' natural beauty and wildlife. However, many academic books and popular newspapers, such as the New York Post, have claimed that this monument is particularly racist in its depictions of the two men accompanying Roosevelt, and one source goes as so far to say that the monument advocates for white supremacy. Because art is influenced by the contemporary social events in which it was made, many works of American art unfortunately reflect racist sentiment that was felt throughout the country from the antebellum era through the Civil Rights Movement. The equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt reflects these racist sentiments felt in the United States through its depiction of Native Americans and African Americans with respect to the juxtaposition of the white man in the monument, former United States President Theodore Roosevelt. The United States has a long history with institutionalized racism, beginning with slavery, and even today there are still remnants of such ideologies through various monuments found throughout the country. For example, in New Orleans resides the Liberty Monument, a highly controversial monument which was dedicated in response to massive violent uprisings in the city in reaction to the impeachment of freedmen-supporting governor of Louisiana, William Pitt Kellogg. The leader of a paramilitary white supremacist group called the White League, John McHenry, then took office and passed several discriminatory laws against those who essentially were not white Christian men. The monument reads, "United States troops took over the state government and reinstated the usurpers," referring to Governor Kellogg in the North. But the national election of 1876 recognized white supremacy, referring to Governor McHenry, in the South and gave us our state. Racism has even bled into the commemoration of even the most revered presidents in United States history. The Emancipation Monument, built in 1876, commemorates the Emancipation Proclamation by then-President Abraham Lincoln. While the monument's intention was to celebrate the emancipation of slaves across the country as a result of the President's address in 1863, many historians claim that the way in which the slave kneeling below Lincoln is depicted is perpetuating racist ideology, because the freedman is shown in a subjugating position in reference to Lincoln standing tall above, extending his powerful hand below, and looking down upon the former slave, who is dressed in baggy rags, only able to cover the freedman's waist. Frederick Douglass, famous abolitionist, also spoke at the monument's dedication and said that the monument showed the freedman on his knees when a more manly, human attitude would have been more indicative of freedom. The depiction of the freedman in the Emancipation Monument is very similar to the representation of the African American man in the equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt, who is shown walking behind and below the former president wearing cloth around his waist and tending to his horse. To Roosevelt's right is a stereotypical depiction of a Native American man, juxtaposed in the same subjugating fashion, wearing cloth around his waist and donning a traditional headdress and necklace. These two groups of people, Native and African Americans, were subject to conquest and enslavement by white men for almost all of American history, and the position of Theodore Roosevelt on horseback, gun in hand, with these two representative people lagging behind, seems to not only acknowledge this dark history, but also seems to celebrate it. This could be due largely in part by the fact that this monument was erected and dedicated in 1940, a time in which both African Americans and Native Americans, the two ethnic groups who are shown in this monument, did not have equal rights to white Americans and were subject to legal, social, and economic discrimination throughout the country. The portrayal of national leaders on horseback is normally a celebration of martial victory or conquest of land or people. This is odd because although Theodore Roosevelt led the famed Rough Riders cavalry unit into many victorious battles in the Spanish-American War, Roosevelt fought neither African Americans nor Native Americans. Therefore, this dominant position over these two men taken by Theodore Roosevelt reflects the centuries-long conquest of these marginalized groups by white men in positions of power.